And we're live. Hey, well, welcome to another episode of the Operation Grow Show, Season 5, the breeding project one. Uh, Going to talk about plant breeding and genetics, etc., and taking it through. Um, yeah, talking, just getting down into a bit more detail, hopefully demystifying it a bit. And on that note, hey, how's everybody doing? Got a fairly full panel here today, be quite cool. Today's topic is going to look at some tools and ways that you can use them to figure out what you've got and what you're working with, etc. How to work it backwards as well as work forwards with them to help you with your selection criteria and process. So yeah, how's everybody doing? Let's see, Lefty, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah, good week. Just been trying to finish transplanting my rise plants. Starting to see some pre-flower sexing. I'm seeing a few males and a few females on both of the cultivars.
Mm-hmm.
So about another week, and they're going to get flipped. I'm at about 4 or 5 nodes at least on each one of the plants. They're starting to get a lot of alternating nodes, so they're pretty close to being mature and being ready. So yeah, I'm just going to give them a week after I finish transplant today, and tomorrow I'm probably be flipping them probably next weekend if everything goes okay.
No, that's cool. Cascadian, how you doing, sir?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Glad to be here. Love talking the plant breeding. So this will be a joy, man.
And how's the first week of business been?
Good. It's
Excellent.
there was a bit of a peak because of all the hype, and then a bit of a lull because the hype wore off. But things will pick up again once some reviews come in. I think that's the way the Etsy stack to work is the reviews take you up. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes when the dust settles and the reviews come in, and then the slow climb back into something exciting.
I always find that it's always like that. Yeah, the highs and lows of sales. Ah, man, I don't know how people do it. It's like, and promise of a sale. Yeah, no, excellent. No, well, it sounds good. I hope it keeps going well. Yeah. Raptor, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Yeah. Not much to say. Just actually, yeah. 5, 6 days into flower of the scarlet begonias, and they really seem to take a liking to, we'll say, the extreme plant stress treating. Yeah. It was cool to see how resilient this freaking plant is. It's yeah, I really like it. Oh, by the way, I am growing scarlet begonias, and yeah, I'm super stoked to see the outcome. Yeah, I should be seeing bud development in a week or so. Yeah, 2 weeks max. I've noticed with some stuff, but yeah, I've noticed with Jeff stuff, it's kind of been in between 2 to 3 weeks, a little earlier, but that sweet spot. So yeah, I really stoked for that. But yeah, not much else to say. Just been dealing with school, been trying, letting the spawn grow that I have on my mushrooms, and yeah, they're doing pretty good. They're really itching to get going. So yeah, kind of taking on a bunch of stuff all at once. So it's interesting to balance out my time. But yeah, it's going really well. I'm super excited to see the outcome of all this stuff. Yeah, I was able to take 4 clones, 2 from each, and I did pH them to 6.0 around there. It was the test is within 0.5 accuracy, so it's between 6, 6.5, 5.5. So yeah, it's fun redoing all the pH stuff that I would do in the lab without like a really sensitive meter. So it's just interesting to try it out the way everyone's been doing it. So yeah, pretty excited. Was able to basically reset everything before the I flipped to flower, and yeah, everything's going well. So
Nice.
really glad to be in flower. Gosh.
Got there in the end.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
thank you so much.
I hear from a number of reliable sources and whatnot, and from my cousin Trip that Scarlet Begonia is particularly good. Very nice,
Yeah,
very nice.
yeah.
Yeah, and then hopefully, like some of the tools and that we look at today, you know, it's not just for plants. It'll be really useful on the mushroom side of things, being able to track it through. And I think if you're doing you can apply it to almost anything. So I think it would be pretty cool. Tyler, how are you doing, sir? Long time no. Well, yeah, I know you've been a busy man. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good. So staying busy with work in the garden and keep the family happy.
Yeah. And how's the seedlings and that coming along?
Pretty good. All the clones seem to take. I only took one of each, so it's kind of ballsy, but I just kept heavy with the foliar.
Yeah, well, it worked out in the end then.
Yeah, a bunch of seeds just showed up, so I'm gonna be popping some new stuff. Got some dark hollow and some scarlet begonias actually on the go. So
excellent, nice. Really jumping in. So we've got Genetic Memory Farms. Good evening, sir. Good afternoon.
And good day to you, fine peoples.
How y'all doing? Good to see y'all. So happy to be here, hang out with y'all. I'm still going through trying to get those old bag seed to pop. So I started moving on to the other projects that I had lined up before we started this, and then I'm going to keep kind of going back to this bag seed and trying different methods. I've been looking at what Pat over at Green Bicycles is doing, and I think I'm going to go ahead and just order the gibberellic acid and give that a run and a couple others. But since those weren't popping so well, I ended up putting in the seeds I got from Eagle for Subcool. So I've got some sangria a couple sangrias growing right now for Subcool. And me, if I've got a decent sangria and I've got a deep chunk male around, they're gonna do it.
Cool. Sounds good. And duckweed sneaking in there.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Cheers, everyone on the panel. Shubi, Cascadian, Lefty, Raptor, and GMF, and Pete for this awesome show. And everyone in chat. My PC is fucked up. Laptop is fucked up. So just have to deal with the voices today.
Just the voice in the cloud.
Right. There's a voice in your head.
Nice.
Yeah, everything's doing fine. I popped those TKM10 onto Platinum Pies. So they're just about like 5 weeks from seed. So probably gonna up pot tonight. Maybe to like 1 gallons or so. I was thinking about leaving them in those solo cups to kind of stress them a little bit to hopefully get them to pre-flower a little faster so I could sex them, because unfortunately where I am, sex testing on plants is not really accessible. So there are a couple of routes I could take, but I was having a little discussion with Purple Tom last night, and he did bring to my attention, like usually like when you slow down a plant's growth, like basically by letting them get root bound or whatever in that cup, they're not as vigorous. So yeah, I guess I'll upload those, and then go the method I've been using all the time. I just take a top from 3 nodes down, clone that, put that into flower, and see what happens. Ain't got nothing but time. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. They seem pretty healthy thus far. Yeah, I'm working with some other stuff. It's the name of it is Charisma. The makeup of it is slurricane onto a GMO mac, and then the F1s from that BC back to the slurricane. So yes, Pete, yes.
Give the man a badge. I know I'm gonna fuck it up.
I can't be making the mistakes, especially around here. Um, so yeah, the only thing with those, it sounds pretty nice. I'm just having a bit of trouble with those seeds germinating in terms of they're germinating, but pretty funky. Like they're slow on germination. They don't want to like. They don't seem to have enough energy to crack the seed open and actually pull their those first leaves out.
Mm.
I had a kind of crazy mutation with number one, I think it was, where a part of the stem just like swole up and got that nut from like week 2 from seed, and like they're like at least 7 to 8 fucking um tops coming out at that point, and then the plant just continued to grow as normal. So I definitely monitor that one. Maybe in a bit when the light comes on, I'll probably get a shot for you guys.
Mm.
So yeah,
Sounds good.
looking forward to that. Yeah, still have those other stuff from what I was working on previously, flowering. Um, because they were crossed with the land race. I really don't know what flowering time to expect on those.
Eventually.
So it's just kind of eyeball it with the old trichome check, and see how that goes. So yeah,
Like a Skoda, 0 to 60, eventually.
we'll get there.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, it sounds like everybody's projects are getting underway, going well, which is cool. So yeah. And I know over the last few weeks and shows that we've been talking about, doing all these different crosses and, using Punnett Squares and things like that. And I thought it might be, if we were to try and like do like a working example, like step through something and show some of the tools that are actually, freely available that you can use and then work out so that you can try and figure out, maybe what is the genotype that you're working with based on the phenotypes that you keep seeing. You could start to make some assumptions as to what the genotypes were, but also, a tool that allows you to track the generations, track the pedigree of what you're working with. So over time, you can see and you can go back and add in as you realize, oh, these are different bits and pieces. You can add that information back in. And so allows you to select from your pool of genetics, essentially. You kind of know what the different generations, that pack of seeds, what it's likely to produce. You've got a good, reliable record on how it got to that point. So if you're ever going to get into doing it, commercially, you can at least back it up with some nice chart, like the stuff that produces these sorts of charts, which makes it a bit more visually easy to identify what's going on. So let's figure out how to do that quickly. So yeah, I'd say one of the, anybody keeps an eye on chat and picks up on any questions, that'd be great.
Sure thing.
So I guess we go make like an assumption on, we're going to take 2 plants, a male and a female, and we don't know the lineage of them. We just know that they have tall leaves. Well, one's tall, one's short, and one's got broad leaf and one's got narrow leaf. And what we actually want to try and get at the end of this whole thing is a stable, tall, narrow leaf plant. So stable being when I cross it amongst itself, within its line, it only ever produces tall, narrow plants. What we do know, however, is that the short and the narrow are both recessive traits. So the one thing we do know is that this P2 parent is a homozygous recessive plant. Okay, we just there's the only way it'll be short and the only way it can be narrow is that. But P1 we're not too sure about because tall and broad are dominant traits, so it'll appear regardless. So if we cross those two, the two potential outcomes, well, so we cross them and what we get is tall, in this F1 generation that comes out, we get a tall, broad one. Oh shit, my spelling's gone crap, even though it's already there. And what we also get is a short, broad plant. So we can then give it like a phenotype. We just use TB for tall and broad, SN for short and narrow, just to describe the phenotype. It's not to describe the genotype, just the phenotype. So here we've got tall, broad, and we've got short, broad. That's the outcome of these two plants. And we're keeping a track on this other one here, saying, okay, so those are the parents of the two. Now the software, this is just a spreadsheet. So you could use Google Docs, whatever, Google Sheets or Excel or something like that, just to keep it in there. And you can then track things. You can have another page where you're writing down what the cross was. And, you make P1 to be the mom, P2 parent, or parent 1, parent 2. This is just a line. I just named these things P1, P2. They could be called whatever. You make that's always female, that's the male when it starts to do and that's important in terms of the next piece of software, which is, again, this is a free piece of software. It's called Helium, and it's available from, I can probably put this link up in chat. Let me copy it. No, let me see. Actually, chat disappeared too. Oh, I've lost it somewhere on the screen. That's a good link and source for the Helium bit of software. There's the rest of the resource for it somewhere else. I'll pick it up in a minute. Come back to that. But in here, what you can do is one other piece. Sorry. Where's this window? Can you see my screen still, or has it stopped showing?
So it's the Excel sheet on one half, and then.
Oh, okay. Only showing the Excel sheet now. No, that's better. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've taken what was in the Excel spreadsheet, and this piece of software just wants you to put it in this particular order. Again, it says P1, and we've got our lineage. The software is called Helium, this software here. So we bring it in, and this shows that this cross gave us these two. The other thing that I've also included with it is a description of the phenotypes for each one, like we did in the spreadsheet, saying, these are tall, these are broad, etc., etc. So I can actually have a look at, show me all the tall plants in my collection, or show me all the short plants that came from that cross. I can look at the phenotype and say, I want we started off with short and broad. We're not interested. Only one of those cropped up anyway. So we've got two phenotypes that were expressed from crossing these two genotypes. The fact that we got the short one, though, does give you a clue as to the genotype of the P1 parent. Given that P2 is homozygous recessive, and when you crossed it with the other parent and you got a short version, so you got a homozygous recessive plant turning up, but it was broad, means that P1 parent is heterozygous on the tall side, but homozygous on the broad side. Because we got no recessive, we got no narrow leaf plants turning up in the first F1 cross. So when it comes to furthering this generation, what you're going to do is you're going to pick two, you're going to pick two from the phenotype that you were looking for. Well, you're going to have to go with tall and broad. It's still not quite what you're looking for, but it doesn't have any of the short, well, there's a short recessive kicking around in there somewhere. But you've and that the broad and the narrow was recessive, so you're not going to see it in the first generation. So now you take this F1, the male one, you're just ignoring the short, you're not interested in it. And we take that F1 and then you cross it out. Now this is where it gets a bit like, okay, there's a few more options that suddenly spring up. So what we'll then do is you'll go in and say, well, we need to come up with a naming convention for the female and the male version of that. So we'll do an underscore for male plant of that phenotype, and we'll just leave the underscore out for a female version of that plant. So this would now, and then we take the F3 generation, which will be crossing, so the F2 generation, which is going to say take you still want to keep track of the bits and pieces. You then take, you'd say it's the F1 crossed with, I think it's the F2, sorry, F2A is going to be, all right, and then you would note down what its genotype, what phenotype it expressed. I've actually gone ahead and done this earlier because otherwise we'd be here forever. This is all the different outcomes by doing these different crosses. Let me zoom in on this. So when you take the F1 and I've crossed it with itself, you're going to get, because that's the one you're crossing, you're going to get 9 different genotypes being expressed, but you're only going to see, we've got tall and broad, tall and narrow, short and broad, and short and narrow. So there's 4 phenotypes get expressed from that cross. And the only ones you'd be interested in are the tall and narrow ones. You're not going to be taking anything that's tall and broad, because as soon as it shows the narrow, it means you've locked in that recessive trait. So here I've just used M and D just to mark off mom and dad. Sorry. And then when we load in pedigree, please work. There we go. You suddenly see that the F1 generation from, this cross here that produces very little on its out, doesn't have many, very much variation in its outcome. So you'll see as soon as you're crossing something, this one is, that you have recessive traits in the genes, because suddenly the F2 generation just explodes in variety. You don't have this consistency. So this is like all the different genotypes down all of a sudden. It's like there's a huge variety that you have to deal with. But out of that, there's only a certain number of phenotypes. So you're using your phenotypes to do that selection by running it through, by using this. Let me go and load up the thing. I'm botching this so badly. Actually, put on all the genotypes there as well. So, right, let's color it up. We got, from these ones, we got the 2 different genotypes that we decided to work with. This was one that had absolutely nothing, and we crossed them amongst themselves. So we started with, this line up here is tall and broad crossed with short and narrow. gave us tall and broad, and then we picked that and crossed it with itself, other tall and broad ones, and that produced tall and narrow plant. It also produced a tall and broad plant, and it produced a tall and broad plant. It also, so those were the results of its offspring. We took the two tall and narrow plant that came from it. We took another tall and narrow plant, we crossed it, so male and female, the two, and it produced only one genotype, which was tall and narrow. So we now know that those two plants in that F2 generation, we happen to actually luckily pick within the F2 generation, we picked the two that produced a stable outcome. And because they only produced one phenotype, when you cross them, there was no other phenotype being expressed. It means that you've now got a homozygous on both traits that you were looking for. Whereas the other one that was cross-produced this massive array of other different genotypes, but only a few of the phenotypes that we were interested in. So again, these were the phenotypes that we wanted to continue with, which were tall and narrow, tall and narrow. But this tall and narrow in this selection has a recessive short trait hidden in it. So when you cross them, you suddenly produce tall and narrow. You get two tall and narrows, but also a short and narrow. And that lets you know that these two plants are not homozygous. But elsewhere in it, there is the homozygous pair. So it's still, you know, it's a matter of luck. So you've got to cross and cross and cross. But as a result of seeing what's coming out, you can start to work out what the you know, where you are. Okay, I'm now this is, you know, this is homozygous, etc., or not. Yeah. Now this bit of software I can highly recommend. This Helium. It's a really good piece of software, and you can pad out the. You know, you can put more and more and more into what you want to add into that genotype. So you could also do things like. You could put in, I mean, if you were getting it recorded, you could put THC levels in, and you could say that it, okay, so that would be a N for numerical sequential numbers. You could put in like what year, that's what the N is for. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember what the data formats were. Q. So you would put Q in, so because it's a measurement, a number, but you could also give it a year or a date stamp, which is sequential. But now you can put in with each one of these. Okay, so this was, you know, 10%, etc., and you could fill that out. So now you could also trace like the THC lineage and go, okay, as soon as you add these two together, suddenly everything that comes off from there really does have extra THC or doesn't have it, or you get better at understanding what will happen when you mix A and B together. So yeah.
That's a pretty cool piece of software there, yeah, for sure. I'm gonna have to play around with that a little bit. Even to make like established genetic hierarchies that we already know, would be interesting to see them laid out like that.
And you can start to think, you know, you can look back through your things and go, okay, let me just put these together. Even if you don't necessarily know the phenotypes, you can just start to track the lineage, because all you need to know is what was the parent of that one, what were the two parents, and you can just slowly build it up. And then as you identify phenotypes in that, you can start to write them down. Or you identify traits, more to the point, it's you're identifying traits as you go. And then those combination of the traits is what produces the phenotype that you're interested in. Yeah, you can suddenly go, ooh, I mean, find everything, what's the traits of everything with high THC in there? All right, it's these things. And now I know what to look for going forward.
Yeah, you could make all kinds of criteria.
And you could combine all the information from everybody else, because if you're doing it by trait and not really saying, okay, it's, you know, this combination of traits, yes, there's different environment factors, but, you know, it's collecting all those, you know, everybody who was growing lemon, Jeffrey wrote down all the different traits that they saw. There's a degree of commonality that starts to crop up, for example, or
Yeah, for sure. If you
And
start
just so I'm
watching,
following along, so you downloaded this Putin, correct? This is a downloaded piece of software that you have to run off your system, or is this off their database?
Yeah, no, it's you download it yourself. I'll
Right. I'm downloading it
put
right now. I
the
think off your link.
yeah.
Was that link in the chat for YouTube or the Zoom?
Yeah, for YouTube. Yeah. I'll put it in this chat as well.
Portland trying to find it.
yeah, it's up there a ways now.
And you can also download it from there. So yeah, if you're if you're serious about it, then this is, I think, a really good piece of software. They've taken, it is interesting. They've got a bunch of other bits that get way more complicated as well. So if you're at school, for instance, or when you're getting actual DNA sequences, they've got software that will handle that as well. The example files that you download for this is for different types of rye grain that they were doing experiments with. This is from an agricultural college or university, I should say. Yeah, no. And the best thing is it's free. So, well, maybe you'll check the T's and C's, but it certainly appears to be free. I think it is open source, meaning you can sell it for money.
Yeah, I like that they did that for students and just for the public in general. That's really cool. And it really allows people to get a visual, just like you've been showing. Like I was a little worried when we were getting into like the nitty-gritty of all this. I was like, how are we going to visualize this? And then I got reminded of the gummy bears. I was like, oh yeah, actually stuff like that actually works out. And then we got this nice little flow chart, just that just really breaks everything down. So yeah, I'm glad that we're able to basically go over everything this week. Just I know when I studied, I needed to do that over the week. Just go over all the notes in general and just really help me try to understand everything. So yeah, I appreciate it. It's like our own little study group, but with cannabis. Even better.
Yeah, exactly. Allegedly.
Hey, hemp is cannabis.
And you can write down all sorts of exactly, precisely. And you can write down all sorts of traits as well. I mean, you could take note of the type of shape of seed, size of seed, things like that. If you really want to get down to it. I mean, the more data you obviously capture it, the better. But then having somebody that compiles it nicely for you is
how much it stretches, like terpene expression. There's all kinds of stuff you could track if you really wanted to like dial that plant into commercial homozygosity. You could with a program like that.
Yeah. And then of course, the other piece of software tool to use is that Punnett Square website, which share the link for that again. Punnett Square account. That's really good. And working to that example that we just did, and I can go through it on the Punnett Square, but just to show quickly, I guess. So what it turns out that we were working with was something we started with. This was the genetic material we started with, and did the first cross, and it produced these two phenotypes and only two genotypes. And then we took from the pool that looked like what we had to go with it because it doesn't have the short bit. So that is the delay, and that produced because within itself. Oops. As far as genotype goes, there's 9 unique genotypic combinations there, but from a phenotypic expression, there's only 4 different phenotypes. But that's the catch, of course. You're going by what you see being expressed on the outside, and then you take you happen to pick lucky in that group, figure out what you've got. You've got a tall. If you accidentally pick, well, there we go. You suddenly wind up with one. So we crossed the 2 tall ones where it wasn't homozygous on the tall gene, and you're going to get 2 phenotypes being expressed. But there are actually 3 genotypes at play, but you're seeing 2 phenotypes being expressed. And you make, out of those ones, in there are some homozygous genotypes that you're looking for. So yeah, that's the Punnett Square calculator. Again, really good site, highly recommend. So yeah, any questions in that from chat? Feel free to fire
I've been
away.
scanning the whole time. I haven't seen anything. So yeah, if anyone has been wondering anything, please feel free to write it down in chat. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but yeah, again, you breaking it down with the charts, I think, helped me understand it much more quickly, and especially the color coordinated, like having everything separated by colors as well. Just I liked when you were going through it and picking out traits, and then it specifically just blanketed out everything else that wasn't it, and just showed you exactly what you're looking for. It's yeah, organization. That's all it is. Like we were mentioning last week, I believe someone in the chat mentioned like, oh, I've been breeding without all this stuff for like decades or whatever. It's like, yeah, but this is nice to assist. It's just a tool. So.
What would be really cool is somebody who's got all of that knowledge sat down and filled it out and went, okay, there you go. Because then as a guide to doing things, it's like, okay, that's where it'd be, in fact, EU Seed Finder, they have their equivalent pretty much of something very similar to that galaxy kind of effect, where it'll show you how things are all linked together. And there again, you want to be able to bring in, show me all the phenotype, what phenotypes followed this through, what traits follow, and it's kind of done by traits there as well. So what do I see with these different ones? And then you can really quickly work out, oh, this is the one that keeps bringing it to the party. Even from way back in its lineage. If you're seeing this, it had to come from back there originally. So you can like trace back the sources of the different elements that you're playing with. And you do see that, when you get to like around F3, F4, depending on how many traits you're working with, it will start to lock in at that point. So you can then take it out and go, okay, I've stabilized those traits into it at the F4 level. I'll now go and find another donor plant to bring in some other traits that I want to lock in and start to work it again. That producing those super stable lines, that is what kind of narrows out the gene pool, because you're removing everything that you're making everything homozygous as you go. So by the time you're finished, it doesn't have any of the other option available anymore. I guess that's where the open pollination heirloom stuff wins, because it's constantly mixing it up. It's never being overly selectively bred in that regard.
Yeah, it just makes it even more apparent. Like if you couldn't discern it enough, like, I mean, I know it'll help me a lot just in starting to see it like easier. I know as I get more experience throughout the years, it'll just be, gosh, I don't, hopefully, like just being like fascinated with the plant doesn't go away from just looking at the plant so much. You know what I mean? But
Mm.
I feel like it won't. I feel like I'll just like get even more intrigued. I'll see even more stuff that I haven't seen before. So yeah, yeah, it's just like going out into the forest and learning what's in the forest. Before I was just walking around like, oh, trees and plants. Now it's like, oh yeah, but look at this leaf shape. Look at this, look at how tall I get. Last time I was here, it was like so. How much? How tall was this from the last time I was here? So
Mm.
getting to getting to see all that is really interesting.
Yeah, and we've got to come up with a way of, that's a different, okay. So ask how many different traits you'd want to search using the program. But that becomes the catch, of course.
Kind of, yeah, I was just gonna share a thought similar to that question I was sitting here thinking about. So if you wanted to track like you were doing tall broadleaf, or was it tall narrowleaf, for example? Tall
Yeah, tall,
narrowleaf.
narrow, short, and broad. I mean, tall and broad, short and narrow, and then trying to produce
So
tall and narrow. So
if all you cared about was say tall and narrow, would it make sense to track tall, narrow, the amount of stretch, the terpenes, like over track to help with genotyping? Because like you're gonna have tall and broads. You're gonna have, say you pop 100 seeds, you might have 20 that are tall and broads, but you might have 10 that throw pine, 5 that throw lemon, and 5 that throw strawberries.
yeah,
You might not be selecting for terpenes, but you might notice that this terp set often goes with these other genetics. So over analyzing the traits beyond what you're actually trying to lock down could help to sort out what traits are actually grouped together so that you can further identify within that tall broad which ones to actually use, because you're starting to realize that these things are all similar generation after generation and maybe they're tied together. I was just trying to think that through, and then somebody asked that question. So to me, it's almost like you want to track more than you intend to lock down, knowing you
yeah,
do not intend to lock them all down. Like your goal is not to lock everything you're tracing down, but to use those as markers to peg down the ones you actually care about.
exactly. I mean, it's the more clues that point to this is the plant I want to select going forward. Yeah, because you might find exactly like it's tall and broad and smells like lemons, but has 0 THC. Tall, broad, smells like strawberries, looks the same. The only difference is it smells like strawberries, and now it's got high THC. So you're only now interested going forward. Your selection criteria suddenly includes tall, broad, and smells like strawberries. So the more of that you can capture as you go, then that's the idea of being, it's like observable, quantifiable traits, or it needs to be measurable as well. Something that's quite distinct. Feeling traits are way more difficult to accurately track. So that sticking with, when you're doing it to start, it's picking a few things, I guess, that are easy to go with, and that's doing something like tall and broad leaf, or something along those lines. Okay, it's you can see it in both the male and the female plant, so you're not trying to pick something that's only coming from the female line, part of the line. Pick a few things that you may see on both plants, because it does make it easier to then go and pick the male that supports what you're looking for in the female as well. In choosing the inbreeding pairs to breed with. Otherwise, how do you pick the right male to go with this female if they're all looking very different? At some point, you might realize, hey, these males, when I cross them with those females, but then again, you've written down what was the offspring that you got from them. And you suddenly realize, okay, so that style male with that style female always produces this. That's why I want those males. And you then you've worked it back to what the parent lines were bringing to the party. And at any point in that, you could just do a back cross with one of the parents, a BC with one of the original parents, especially the homozygous one. If you cross anything with that and you only get one phenotype coming out, then you know what you crossed with it was also homozygous. So that's where that becomes useful. You're not using it to lock in any traits or anything like that. You just want to check, rather than me going around and popping, I do all these different combinations. I know the one up there, and if I just check against it, I can see if this one's it's heterozygous on the one side. Ignore it.
It sounds so fun when you put it on paper until you actually start to do the fucking work.
So true.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Oh fuck! But it's cool though. It's cool. You definitely have to have that fucking drive and need and want to really fucking like decide to truly breed something. Because I mean, yeah, we could just spend fucking 2 hours here talking about this and cover it like 85%. But yeah, that 2 hours is like 10-15 years of work.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, but again, you can reduce that time frame by the better notes you keep, the more information you keep about it, you can try and bring it down a bit quicker. And that's the thing, is if we were all keeping those kind of notes when it came to me giving you the seed, I could hand you the notes with it, and you would kind of know, this is what it's going to do when I mix it with this, because I can look at how it's behaved. You know what I mean?
And then I guess like the more accessible like testing is like sex testing, or even is there like genotype testing and stuff?
That would be the marker assisted stuff we're talking about. Once you know a marker, you can test it for a marker, which is not a full genome sequence, but it's enough to delineate it from something else. So it's a much faster, quicker technique than trying to sequence an entire genome.
Right. You can start to do it with fingerprinting.
Yep.
Right. But the cost of that now is probably pretty high, right? To do some kind of...
Yeah, and I think it's also finding places to do it. I mean, most universities have got the lab space to do it in. It's not a home kit yet. I mean, that's when it needs to get down to a home kit.
That's what I was getting to. Basically, it needs to like get down to somewhere where the home breeder could use it to just speed up the process,
Yeah, I know that Delta Leaf Labs were looking at doing it as as part of their service. They were investigating. I don't know how much further that's gone. So when you were sending it off to be sex tested, because it's not a protein marker check that they do for that, they actually have to look and see, does it have the chromosomes? So as part of that process, might as well just fingerprint it as well, I guess. And then you could say these traits match, go with this fingerprint, and then you can just look at the fingerprints from a really early stage. You just grab the cotyledon and look at the genetics of the thing and go, oh, it's got the fingerprint that I'm interested in, let's continue with it. That's not genetic modification or anything along those lines or anything special. It's just sort of looking at the macro phenotype being expressed. You're looking at the micro phenotype being expressed. You're looking that's the genetic fingerprint itself. You're not quite down to the genome yet.
And speaking of this particular topic, there's a relevant question, looks like coming out of Bionic Chronic, New Zealand. Is there a particular phenotype identified that carries more overall terps THC than another? ... And then is there a weaker, lower terp THC overall quantity phenotype, fem only? And I think this is what you're talking about. It's finding assisted markers. So we won't necessarily know one's high THC or low THC unless we use a genetic marker, but we can find an associated trait that will give us an indication that we can observe without testing. And that's the whole idea. We're talking about recording all this information, recording more traits than you realize you're going to use, just so we can potentially figure out, okay, every time we do see a high THC or a high terp content, it comes along with this other secondary trait as an indicator. Like, PM resistance and leaf variegation. We know that happens to be a very linked trait. If you see varied leaves, a much better PM resistance.
Exactly. So you then maybe find that, so again, like going in a certain leaf ratio. I mean, that's the subtlety of it. It could be down to a certain leaf ratio is the indicator that it's going to be a high THC plant or a low THC plant. Yeah, and that takes the ratio is not just it's taking that combination of width and height or breadth and length into account. But yeah, there could be some really interesting factors, as you say. The more we can pull together, the better. Before you go for the fruit smoke. Sorry. Just reading some of the comments. You keeping really quiet there, Tyler?
Just learning, man. Just learning. This isn't my wheelhouse, so it's the first time around.
Yeah, so I mean, therefore, what? Yeah, I'm just trying to, what are some of the things that come across as daunting? I was going to say, this makes it so much easier that as soon as you start putting it all up on the screen, you go, Jesus, it just got like, it got busy like that.
Now there's colors. No.
It's really calm when you do it yourself, but when you're suddenly doing what you realize, hang on a second, this is actually a bit more complicated than I was. I ran through it by myself a few times.
Yeah. This is just the next step from the Punnett Squares.
Yeah, and this actually allows you to work with a much bigger trait profile than a Punnett Square does, because those things get horrendous. And you can still doing this, you can start to work out the genotype without having to do a Punnett Square. I mean, that becomes a thing about tracking those traits marketers. If it appears everywhere, it's dominant. If it disappears the second I cross it with something else, it's recessive. And so you can just, as you go, you can tag them. But yeah, try and do 20 traits with the Punnett Square. Good luck. How big is the piece of paper?
Yeah, not even for a grade or a degree would I do that.
And then you'll also get, you pick up the co-dominant stuff and, the in-between bits and pieces.
Yep. But it's all back to what I was saying. It's just a matter of these programs being simple or easily accessible enough to the home breeders like ourselves, because just like this simple program here that you have that is free to anybody, that exactly what you said, that just totally took the whole, we need to go and buy a whole ream of fucking paper to do a Punnett Square kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it makes it much more, it's more accessible all of a sudden again.
Yeah. That's my my whole thing is just at the time, man. and that would bring me back to the whole debate we had around Christmas, where I could see why breeders would be pissed if someone took their stuff and went with it. Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole by itself.
But I think this does, when you start to see, okay, hang on a second. So this is how much work really goes into doing it. I think it does start to change your mind when you see it laid out visually, and you can actually follow it as a end consumer. You start to understand, and therefore maybe when you're talking to the breeder that you're buying the seeds from, you start to ask a few more questions. I mean, again, this might be a great tool for a breeder, but as a consumer, it's a great tool to understand this is how it's all put together. These are the building blocks of the industry I'm supporting. So let me just make sure it's being built correctly.
Well, and I'll refer to a comment Mike B made in chat. Most breeders don't want to share their special sauce. And this is kind of where I understand kind of that viewpoint, because in food, people think that recipes are somehow a secret. And the truth is, I can give 10 chefs the same recipe and I'll get 10 different dishes. So I think, yes, there may be that fear, but the truth is, by actually, like a beer recipe, by sharing the beer recipe with you, I don't take anything away from myself, right? But you and I are both going to be able to make and produce this thing, and it doesn't necessarily take anything away from either of us just because we can both do it. That's where I think learning to share information and learning to share from ourselves to kind of overcome some of that, I don't want to call it selfishness or fear or whatever, but coming over some of that negativity really kind of does help, I think, establish what you've been doing. If you can tell someone how you got to where you are, it's a lot more, I don't want to say trustworthy, but you're being a lot more open and honest, so that when I take it and try to work with it, I have a better idea of what I'm actually doing. It's like selling food without an ingredient list on it. That doesn't really, that's not really safe.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole, that whole debate was around the simple fact of, I don't have to sell you the seeds either. If I don't want you to do anything with them, I can just not sell them to you. If I know you're going to go and do it, that's my entire prerogative. But it just makes it you just like to think that maybe some of these people that are, just quickly taking the quickest 2 bits of fire they find, throw it together, thinking fire plus fire equals more fire, which isn't necessarily the case, as you see when it becomes this mishmash of fucking things you're throwing together. But they do happen to strike it lucky and then just ride straight off the back of it with no morals. It's a bit like, you'll crash and burn at some point.
Yeah, and people have this really oversimplified idea that, when I cross something that smells like chocolate, something that smells like strawberry, I'm going to get chocolate covered strawberries. That's not how it works. That you were going to have, you could potentially cross 2 things that are nothing related to those 2 things and end up with a third that is entirely different just because
fine, right?
Yeah. And I think
just look
that's
at
what a lot of people are missing in this. They think, I'm going to cross banana flavor with strawberry flavor and I'll have strawberry banana.
I mean, look, and that's what has happened with the genetics. It's nearly and if you look at what they all started with, I mean, look at landrace stuff. It just smells like weed, really. It's only when you start mixing the pot up with different things like it suddenly pops out. I can't remember what show it was Lemon Hoko was saying. You get it suddenly, the smell, the terpene turns muddy. It's like it doesn't have any distinctiveness from either one. Yeah,
we get the
not
same
all
thing.
Flavors mixed together.
I hate to always bring it back to brewing beer, but the same thing happens when you start mixing a bunch of hops into a recipe. If I take and throw 1 or 2 or 3, I can get complementing flavors. The minute I start throwing just random hops in there, you're going to muddy the flavor profile so much, it's hard to pick out anything really. It just tastes herby.
Yeah, and being able to, it's all great fun. But yeah, I mean, for the mycology side of things, you can use this. Again, it's the same thing, same principle. Anything that you're growing that you want, if you're interested in growing stuff, it's good to keep track of it. It's a great way of actually understanding the genetic side of it.
BX Gunner in chat saying smoking some banana cheesecake from North Star and it's banana cheesecake. I think that's an excellent convention in naming. If you can make something that actually tastes like what you've named it after, that's much better. I don't want to call it marketing, but it's accurate marketing. You're educating your consumer with the name of the product that's intelligent, right? But if you call it banana cheesecake and it tastes neither banana nor cheesecake, which is what ends up a lot. So I mean, good on North Star for doing that.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think that is definitely part of it. Is the naming conventions being used.
Well, in candy floors,
it's finished.
Like painting, can't muddy the colors too much. And he makes a very good point. You can mix certain colors and get a greater result than what you start with, but that's not always just going to happen by randomly throwing paint colors together. You're probably going to get brown more often than not.
Yeah, what's going to happen when you take all the colors in the palette and mix them together? You're going to get fucking some mud water looking shit.
Exactly. And then you run out and you can't unmuddy it. This is what's difficult to extract them again.
That's great.
So-
You
so
were able to blend it all together, but yeah, you
Yeah,
can't really.
Try break it apart.
Yeah.
So I blended your appetizer, your salad, your soup, your dinner, and your dessert into one trough here.
It might all come out that way, but you don't
Yeah.
want to put it in there that way.
Yeah, in fact, I ate it for you already. I just saved you the hassle.
We do.
Yeah, it is. Hmm.
No,
Yeah.
me.
Well, Gynecology was misnamed.
Oh, one thought I had maybe earlier this week. Does anyone like change their feeding regimen when they breed for seeds in particular,
That's a good
or they
question.
just carry it on?
I make a point to not stress the plants out like I do normally.
Okay.
I want healthy seeds, so
Yeah, but would you, when I say change your feeding regimen, like would you like up like the nitrogen, more nitrogen, and even though they're flowering or anything like that? You change it like that.
no, I don't.
Okay.
I think it needs to think it's naturally, it wants to think it's going to die so that it properly produces the seeds, I guess.
Hmm.
Because that's, in that it's reached its goal. It's being pollinated. Now all it's interested in is finishing up and getting those seeds done.
Yeah, I guess a simpler version to the question might be like, does it use like any specific nutrients to develop those seeds or to make them more healthy?
I've heard
Oh.
boron. I've heard boron's kind of a big one in helping produce seeds.
Well, and if you look at the nutritional
trace
value
element,
of seeds,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it, like what they provide to your diet when you eat them is high amounts of available potassium. So I do think that if you're producing fruit, i.e. a seed, you may end up using larger amounts of potassium, but whether or not that's already available or not, I guess is another question. Because you may have, because it does take.
You already
more
have high
potassium to create
levels of
seed.
potassium and the other one in flowering anyways.
Right. And so like me, I had, just because the Rev has suggested, I've tried it a few times and I have no evidence to back it up. Anecdotally, it seems like it works well. When I do take seeds, but it's a plant that's in a smaller container, I haven't transferred it up to a big 5-gallon or something like that. I will actually crush some some organic pumpkin seeds, and I will leave them floating around in the container in the bottom in a catch tray. And slowly that will eventually release, by the time you're done, it's basically consumed. There's nothing, all the microorganisms and everything have broken it down to nothing. So when I start flower, I will put a small amount of crushed pumpkin seed in there, so it'll basically make a tea with that while it's going through its seed making cycle, if it feels like it needs to take it. That's one reason I do it in the catch tray, is it doesn't force anything onto the plant. It's just optional.
Plugging it up there, Tyler.
Those look like Nintendo glasses.
Gonna play some Excite Bike.
Yeah, buddy. There you go.
Looks like a turn.
No, excellent. Well, that draws us up to the hour, which brings us on to, if anybody in chat wants to jump over and join in on the channel, feel free to jump in. We go off in a bit and just chat, questions, ask whatever you want. It'd be great. Please feel free to join in. If you want to support the show, actually, I should have.
And on the Zoom, I'll talk more about the latest ferment I did, but since some of it has a potentially dangerously low pH, I'm not going to put it on here. Sorry, guys.
If someone actually does decide to use Patreon, it would be great. Patreon link. Feel free to jump on and use whenever you want. But yeah, on that note, you can find me at Operation Grow 2019 on Instagram, or PL Grow Systems on Instagram, also on Facebook. Probably better to do it on Instagram. But then just quickly going around, Lefty, where can everybody find you, sir?
At Lefty's Farm on IG and on Cannabis.
Excellent, excellent. Raptor, where can we find you, sir?
You can find me at Instagram, all one word, all lowercase, at Raptor Grow. And you can find me Tuesdays, Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at Fumador and the Flavors. Yeah, we're usually just joking around, having fun. We have an interview with some interesting people. Yeah, very, very cool. And you can also find us and have a lot of fun with us as well with Brews with Buds, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and same channel, same great place. Yeah, shout out to everyone. Hope you all can join us. If not, I'll see you soon.
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, by the way, please put them in the comment section, and we will try and answer them on chat. Also, if you do become a patron, that's one thing you can do. You can ask questions, and we'll get around to answering them on the show. Cascadian, where can everybody find you, sir? And if you want to give your Etsy shopper link, let us know. I'm quite happy to post that.
Yeah, Cascading Grown on Instagram, and yeah, there's the new Etsy shop selling vegetable seeds. I don't have the chat open on my computer, or I'd post the link, but if somebody else wants to,
I'll throw it up.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it for me, man. You just find me on Brews and Buds, you find me here with Pete, and find me on Instagram if you're looking for me in between time.
Excellent. And GMF, where can we find you, sir?
Well, you can always find me hanging out at Operation Grow here with my friends every Saturday. You can typically find me too, popping in and out over on Fumi's show. Again, another really nice guy that sets a platform for the rest of us to have these discussions. So thank you, Pete. Thank you, Fumador. I'll throw a shout out to Eagle. Thank you, him. All you guys that actually make places for us to gather. So you can find me here hanging out with the community. You can holler at me on IG if you got any food questions, growing questions, anything I can be helpful with, fermentation questions, genetic memory farms on IG. I suppose I should get busy on Cannabis too, but I'm already bad at social media. So but yeah, come hang out. I'm always here. So if I can be of any help to anybody, just give me a holler.
Cool, excellent. And Tyler, Shuby, not that
me.
you need any help, you just fucking blew up.
Yeah, I had no clue what happened there, but yeah. Graham, Scooby-Doo, Cannabis, The Growing Buds, on Facebook, The Growing Buds.
Excellent. And Duckweed.
What up? You can find me mostly in like chats and stuff on anything and everything. Yeah, with Pete on Operation Grow. I've been having some technical difficulties, so I haven't been able to really get onto like Brews and Buds and that kind of stuff. Miss that shit, but I'm still around in chat and hanging in the background there. You can find on Instagram as well, Nuts and Guts 868. That's Nuts and Guts 868. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks, Pete, for always having these weekly informative, very, very informative videos and series, so to speak. Yeah, cheers everybody. Thanks everyone in chat for coming out.
Yeah, and thank everybody in chat. As I said, feel free to jump in on one of those links. I'll post it one more time. So at least we'll be shooting the shit for the next hour or so. But there you go. Feel free. And thank you again. You guys make the show. Thanks to everybody on the panel. See you all next week.